Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Two Cyber Chicks podcast. You're about to join Erika and Jax for an inclusive cybersecurity conversation designed to educate and break the stereotypes of cybersecurity professionals while providing life hacks on how to handle burnout, networking, and goal setting. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hey, Two Cyber Chicks fam. So glad to have you here. Thanks for tuning in. You'll notice that we're missing Jax today. Jax, hope you're having a great time in Texas, but nonetheless, we have a wonderful show planned for you today. So honored to have a fellow cyber chick joining us, Chloe Messdaghi, an accomplished security executive, thought leader, podcaster, public speaker, board member, and a huge advocate within the cybersecurity community. She's been recognized as one of the 50 cybersecurity leaders who helped shape 2020, a power player by SC Media Women in IT Security, Cybersecurity Woman of the Year, Business Insider's Power Player in Cybersecurity, Cybersecurity Advocate of the Year, among many, many others. We're going to bring Chloe on. Chloe, thank you for coming on the show. So excited to have you back.
Oh, thanks for having me back. That was quite an intro.
Girl, I think we could go on for another 30 minutes with all of your super extensive accolades. So honored, huge fan, love to have you back. It's definitely been a while since we last had you on the show, since you and I last caught up. For those that haven't heard from you before, those that may be tuning in since we've rebranded, could you give our listeners, our audience, a little bit of a quick intro on your background, maybe things that I didn't touch on in that intro?
Oh, I mean, I feel like you touched on everything, but I would say that I entered the InfoSec space in about 2017, and I've been in it since. Got in through vulnerability management, then I got into the bug bounty space, and then gamification space in cybersecurity, and then education front, and then now I'm in AI/ML security. And all that started with was someone who basically was working with nonprofits and startups and tech, and then I ended up landing in cybersecurity by pure chance.
I love that. You've held so many roles. I mean, looking at just your profile, head of strategy, chief strategist, managing partner, chief impact officer, CEO, founder, head of threat research. I mean, you really did find your niche in the cyberspace. And there's got to be a lot of different contributing factors, that helped kind of take you there. If you had to give some advice to anybody listening to this, it's like, hey, maybe I haven't found my niche yet. What would be that piece of advice that kind of helped you get to that sweet spot that you're in now?
I think when I started to get to know myself better, that's when kind of things lined up in a sense, because I started trusting myself. I started believing in myself and figuring out what are the things I'm good at. And then also, being able to see myself where I started recognizing that imposter syndrome was something that was holding me back, but it's kind of like an artificial thing, because the reason we have imposter syndrome is the lack of representation. And so channeling the frustration, the anger, the things that I hear and see, and being like, how do I make this better? And also understanding how that directly affects me and others. So I think the more I got to know myself, the better I was able to figure out, okay, what are things I'm good at? What are things that I can improve on? And then taking it there, because no one's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. If you strive for perfection, you will fail miserably and be disappointed time and time again. So I like that approach of just being self-aware, doing that introspection, and figuring out, what are the next steps, and being open-minded to try that new role or to try that new technology and get your hands dirty, roll up those sleeves and figure it out, see how you like it. So I know that you were recently at DEF CON, Black Hat, Squad Con. I've been following all of the things that you've been up to, and And obviously, you've been really focused on the AI, ML, security, bug bounty hunting side of the house. Can you share with us regarding some of these challenges around artificial intelligence, machine learning? How are organizations needing to adjust? Like, what are those trends that you're seeing? What are the top education points that you think that people need to be looking out for?
Yeah, I went into Black Hat DEF CON thinking like, we'll be more prepared to have further conversations other than ChatGPT as a security problem. And then when I realized when I was there was that every single person that I talked to was only talking about ChatGPT, or also we call it like LLMs. And this made me very concerned, because what that means is that us in the security space is that we are ill-equipped at this time. When it comes to AI ML, none of us know how that's built or designed. So how are we supposed to secure something we don't know how it works or the foundations of it? I think the thing that frightens me the most is that there's a lot of influencers out there that keep talking about AI and security when in reality they're really just talking about ChatGPT. And that's just like one part. AI is really broad. But there's other things we need to be concerned about. I remember when I first got this role at Protect AI, I started interviewing folks that work in this space. And the things that kept them up at night was the fact that there's this thing called like data poisoning. So, for example, say that, you have taught this model that every time that it sees like a Russian tank, that this drone would fire at a Russian tank because it has image recognition. But say if you got someone to come in and change what that image is, say to a school bus, that becomes a lot more scary, right? And I know usually when we talk about data poisoning, we think of the red light, green light, that it can take a threat actor to come in and like change the light to a different color, causing a situation or a crash. But I think of like the bigger situations where people are going to become victim because us in security, we're just talking in circles and instead not admitting we don't know. I think that's the one thing that scares me the most, is that I kept seeing that at DEF CON and Black Hat.
Yeah, it seems like there's been a laser focus on like a few trendy things. I'm gonna talk and just spill it.
Go for it. Go for it.
That's how it is, right? It's like
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I mean, even in like the audit and compliance space, right? Like where I play in, my customers are coming to me, and their buzzwords are blockchain, crypto, AI, ML. I'm like, okay, do you guys know what these things are, right? It's like that education aspect, right? And then not knowing how to secure things that you don't necessarily understand. And then on the flip side, right, like on the consulting side, how can we help our customers and guide them to bolster security? How do we allow them to see risk from that larger scale, and not just like, hey, what's trendy and what are you hearing about, but thinking ahead and thinking of everything that's to come. And if you don't have the right things built in from the design perspective, then I mean you're toast, right? Like how are you going to going to like backpedal and try to create things that weren't there? Gosh, I mean, ChatGPT, don't even get me started on that one, because I know Jackson and I always talk about that because we see, thought leadership coming out through that, and it's like reviewed and signed off by somebody, right? But I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So, organizations are now combating that with coming out with AI policies and like banning all of these types of tools from being utilized in the workplace. And it's more so, I feel like, from a place of fear, right? Like we're just going to ban them because we just don't want to mess with it, and we don't want to play in the space, and we don't want to open up that room for risk.
Yes. It is one of those things, because once you give this product to the world that can make their life easier and help their job better, in some ways, like think about how we don't have enough hours in a week, but we have so many things deliverables. So ChatGPT kind of becomes your assistant in a sense to help you get it done. And then companies to take it away from you when you've already started using it and it's been implemented and there hasn't been problems before. It's kind of weird. You're like, You're
Yeah.
like, look at this pretty thing. I've used it. It works really well, but now I can't use it. Also, how would they know? Like, that's the other thing that goes through my mind. How would they know?
That's a very good point. There are workarounds. There
It's
are
called a personal
workarounds.
computer.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. So it is actually, this is pretty surprising for me, knowing how wide scale these conferences are and that you walked in and that was like one of
it's
the
scary.
alarming takeaways.
It is
So,
incredibly scary.
well, these things have to obviously, come from the top. Like we got to start exposing people and educating them. Do you have any like resources off the top
Yeah.
of your mind that you could share with us, so that
Yeah.
we can, start to spread the word and hopefully that's a trickle downstream effect?
Yeah. So during DEF CON week or Hacker Summer Camp, or whatever we would call it, Black Hat, that week we launched the first ever AI ML bug bounty platform. So people all around the world can go and find vulnerabilities and report it on there, get paid out. And we believe in like paying people the right amount. I think a lot of the times when it comes to bug bounty companies, they don't pay out the researchers well enough for the hard work that they've done. And we want to make sure that we give them, good rewards. But also when you find vulnerabilities in AI and ML, they're pretty darn scary. So they should get paid out a lot more, in my opinion. So we launched a platform that does that so people can go in our Discord, hang out and everything. But additionally, we come out with content teaching you how to hack certain AI and ML. So that's pretty cool. And we're going to continue to keep educating the community and being there because I think that this may be one of those situations where no one's really in this space. So that
Yeah.
means no one should experience imposter syndrome because no one knows what they're doing in this space. So just think about it. Like, no matter who you are, your background, you're welcome because no one else knows what they're doing quite yet. And it's good.
Jump in head first.
We're right.
Yep.
And that's how we start solving things. We learn from our mistakes and we learn as we practice and we go. And that's what this is going to be all about, is a lot of learning.
You know what? People were talking about the cloud this way years and years ago, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm definitely going to get these resources from you offline. I'm going to put them in the show notes. So anybody that's tuning in that's like, yeah, I want to get my hands dirty. I want to start getting my hands into this educational content. We're going to provide that. So thank you, Chloe.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. So along with other things that you've been up to, I've been keeping up with those chats around climate change and sustainability and the need for the resilient future and diving into that intersection where InfoSec meets the sustainability. What are some of those things that we as individuals or our organizations that we work for, or even organizational leaders that might be hearing this right now, what can they do to start trending towards that positive impact? And I know that's a loaded question. I know that you've given talks on this, but in a Cliff Note version, what are some actionable steps that we can take?
Yeah, I would say that almost in every industry these days, the talk of climate change and the impact that it has on industries is something that's pretty out there. But then when it comes to InfoSec or cybersecurity, there hasn't been any. So during the pandemic, one of the things, I started recognizing was concerns about climate change threats. One of those was because, in the Bay Area in 2020, there was a massive fires. And so when you opened your curtains, everything was orange and red. And it wasn't Photoshop, those images. And it was surreal and it scared me. It also scared me when later that year I flew somewhere and I saw a bunch of land just completely dry where it used to be, where they would have rain. And then if you just look at just recently, like in California, we had a hurricane, a tropical storm, which is unheard of. And I think the thing that's so hard to understand is how come in our industry we're not talking about it. And I always think of we don't talk about Bruno. That song always plays in my head.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it is. It's like no one's talking about it. I remember when I started researching, like no one's done research in this space yet. No one's given talks about it. No one has even written about it. So I started doing that. And it's finally picking up. It took 2 years to start getting where I am right now on that front. But it is one of those things that makes me concerned because still no one else is talking about it. And being the only one in the room also makes you kind of a target sometimes. And so that's the one thing I would say is kind of frustrating, is that people are scared to talk about it with their colleagues because of the political situation that now climate change exists in, when it shouldn't be political, because it's almost the same argument if the earth is flat. Like, we have had evidence since the 70s, climate change exists, it's happening. Yep. And, when I give these talks, I try to make it as tangible as possible. I share all the data possible because I know if I don't, people won't take it seriously. But I also know it's also a coping mechanism for people to not want to take on that. There's this thing called eco grief. So it's like when you're grieving, you're still like in denial before you go through different series. And I think that's kind of what's going on for some folks.
That's interesting. So it's a taboo topic because people don't want to accept that this is a real thing. This is something that's actually happening day to day. And obviously, I mean, it goes without saying, like, us being in the technology sector, we aren't environmental scientists. This isn't like part of our day-to-day conversation. It's not something that we're like actively been tasked with fixing or trying to move the needle on. But, Mother Nature, right? We've got one, right? We've got one planet. That's something that doesn't matter what space you work in, where you live, it's something that you should care about. And so when we think about how does IT impact the environment, what are those top things that you share with the audiences when you have these talks? Like, what are the top 2 or 3 things that come to mind?
I always give a running list of things. So, like, one is our use of data centers. That's one. The other one is AI. It uses a ton of electricity. The other one is the use of plastic, like swag. It takes about 400 to 1,000 years to decompose, and that's in your shirts. That's everywhere. To e-waste, such as like when you're trying to, when you're like, oh, the new iPhone came out, or oh, the new laptop came out, and you go and you purchase that. And then you're like, what do I do with this parts? That is something of concern. So e-waste also is there because there's rare like materials that are in there. And how you get them is like mining through children in modern day slavery. So, and I don't say that just openly blanket, but these are literally kids that have to go down these really thin tunnels to grab whatever rare materials down there and bring it up. You need small hands, small bodies to do mining. That's not okay. A lot of these people aren't paid. And so it becomes one of those really concerning things, is that we don't even talk about where our things come from. And I think that's like the first thing I try to get everyone to be aware of, is like everything that you use, everything you touch, everything you buy, you have to understand where did it come from, and having that awareness. And that's how we kind of start, understanding, our own carbon footprint in some ways.
No, those are all great points. Because for me, I was like, data center. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. Then you said swag. And I thought about how many pens, highlighters, random little hand sanitizers, you just name it, right? Like
stickers.
Stickers.
Like,
you collect all of these things. You come back with like a little duffel bag situation full of things from every conference that you attend. I mean, you've probably collected thousands, right?
I did it one year, and then I asked myself, did I need any of this? And then now, ever since starting to do work in like climate change, I kid you not, I think like the very first few months, I like changed everything. So like when it came to skincare, when it came to makeup, when it came to clothes, making sure that they're sustainably made, but also the workers were fairly paid.
Yeah, that's a big lifestyle change, right? It's like something that when you're going to switch to a more sustainable lifestyle, you gotta take it and tackle it full on. So I think there's definitely more that we could talk about here. But listening to this perspective, there's a few takeaways that I can already think of, like organizations can definitely implement. So I appreciate all of the insights. If you don't want the swag, say no. That's an easy one, right?
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Or ask for sustainable swag. So such as like, can you get me cotton t-shirts, like 100% cotton t-shirts instead of a mixture of cotton and rayon or something.
Yeah. And there should be easy things without cutting corners. And if the costs are too high, then we should be reconsidering whether these things are needed in the first place, right?
Yep.
So, Chloe, something that I've always admired about you is just your involvement in the community, your passion, your ability to just like make an impact. And then that's just like widespread. I know that you've recently, delivered the chat with the Diana Initiative, and I've been following that, which has been awesome work, by the way. But the combating gender disparities in cybersecurity for marginalized genders really stood out to me. I wish that I could have been there and listened to this talk. So now you're going to have to fill us in. But you delve into this intersectional challenge, right? Faced by individuals, recognizing the compounding factors of race, ethnicity, sexuality, disability. From your perspective, and filling us into whatever you can from this talk, how can leaders make an impact to drive positive change? Would love to hear, any little tidbits, any action that we can take, and even not just from a leader, but like from a peer-to-peer perspective.
Yeah, I think like the one thing I kept pushing on the entire talk, it starts with you, because how you are out in the world, you could impact another person. That could be positive, that could be negative, right? So if I don't keep myself in check, if I'm not, willing to keep learning about different people's identities or their backgrounds, then I'm part of the problem. Because I don't know about you, but I'm sure, Erika, you wouldn't want someone to just like look at you and come up with a bunch of stereotypes all over you, right?
Yeah.
And when you're being judged too, you get that sensation, And so the thing I try to teach people in that particular conversation was the fact that we have to first examine ourselves, who we identify as. You don't always have to put labels on everything, right? But at least getting a sense of understanding who you are, but also for you to learn and go out of your way to learn about others. Because I don't think a lot of people want to go out there and hurt others emotionally, right? And so the best thing, and I think a lot of people that do it accidentally, they are not aware of it. So that's why it's best for us to kind of work on ourselves and learn on our own, and then ask questions. How can I be a better person? What are the things I don't know yet that I need to learn? And I think that's the most empowering thing that you can do for anyone, and even yourself, is to become aware of all these different backgrounds and celebrate them. And also to be there to like hold their hand when needed, or passing a mic to them when needed, but just being there to listen and without judgment.
You make great points, because the world would be really boring if we were all the same.
Right.
So part of that to me is, celebrating like who we are, how we identify. And this is something that's super important to me, also being a female in tech, also being an immigrant, being Colombian, English being my second language. Like, something that's in the back of my mind is always like, trying to seek to understand, like, who is Chloe beyond just a name, beyond what I see on LinkedIn, right? Like, what are those things that make you and your uniqueness, and all of those like beautiful things that you bring to the table, things that we can all learn from each other. And so I always try to do that, but I think we can always do better. And I think that we can always encourage others to try to understand where people are coming from. And then I love what you said about keeping in mind, like, how things come off is not necessarily the way that they were meant to be interpreted. And I think that that's so powerful in itself. Sometimes we're quick to make judgment, or to just take something and take it personally when it wasn't intended. So I love that. And
I think like when people have those moments too, it's usually kind of like, okay, time to check in with yourself. Why are you getting active here? What has happened here? Is this something, and you can always find someone, hopefully, that you can bounce it off, someone you can trust and be like, hey, I reacted this way. Was this the correct way to react to something like this? Or is this something I need to work on? And ask people out there, ask them, what is the best way? And you got to be okay with understanding that you may have made a mistake, but that's what being human is, right? We got to make mistakes in this world.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
yeah,
you're never learning.
And thank goodness for those people that tell us that we make a mistake and help us learn from the mistake and give us the feedback so that we can learn and be better and do better. So, Chloe, we're coming at time, unfortunately, but that just means that I'm going to queue you up for our next season. Hopefully, get you locked in. Any new projects? I want to end on a positive note. Are there any new projects that you're working on? Anything that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, if you're interested in getting involved in climate change, reach out to me, DM. It might be something where, more than happy to help or give any answers that I may know. The other thing I would say is, if you're interested in getting to like bug bounty right now in AI and ML, do check out Hunter. You shouldn't have imposter syndrome because no one's in it yet, and you have a place there. And if you need a good crowd, there is our Discord, which is a lot of fun. And last but not least, if you're looking at a way to volunteer your time, or you work for a company and you're thinking, oh, who should I, provide donations to? Diana Initiative is a wonderful organization, and there's so much good stuff up ahead. And I am so excited and so thankful to be part of that team.
Thank you, Chloe. And is LinkedIn still the best place to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever they call it, X, the bird, anything. I'm also on Mastodon, Threads, Instagram. You can find me on anywhere, and I think my DMs are all open, so yeah.
Amazing. So I will put all your socials in the show notes. Chloe, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you back on the show.
Thanks for having me again. I'll see you next year.
See you next year.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Two Cyber Chicks podcast with Erika and Jax. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.